Hey guys, Frank Spear with you. Want to make a video on 2 Kings chapters 1 and 2 and try to show that Elijah was not literally taken up to heaven in a supernatural chariot with supernatural horses while Elisha and the prophets stood there and watched him float away in this chariot, but that this was a literal chariot with literal horses sent out from the king to come and take Elijah to the king. Now, I'm going to try not to read all of 2 Kings chapter 1 because I really want to focus on chapter 2, so I'm going to try to give you the gist of this. And basically, one of the kings of Israel falls, gets sick, he's on his deathbed, or he thinks he may be on his deathbed, and so he calls his messengers to him and sends them out to find out from Beelzebul, the god of Ekron, whether or not he's going to recover from his illness. And as the messengers are going out to do this, they meet Elijah. Elijah hears the story and he says, go back and tell the king, is there no God in Israel that you have to go to these false gods, these idols, these heathen gods to try to determine your fate? So they go back, they tell the king, and the king sends out a small army of 50 soldiers with a captain to come out and get Elijah. Elijah does not go back with them. Rather, he calls down fire from heaven and destroys them. The king does it a second time. Same thing happens. He does it a third time. This time Elijah goes with them to see the king, and he tells the king the same thing he told the messengers. Is there no God in Israel? You had to go inquire of these false gods. Now let me suggest to you that the calling down of fire from heaven upon these soldiers was symbolic language of a literal physical destruction of them by the 50 men that were with Elijah, 50 strong men that were willing to fight these soldiers. They were prophets of God, and so God was with them, and they were able to defeat these king's soldiers. We'll see that as we go on. Okay, so that happens. This at the last part of 1 Kings 1, the king dies eventually because Elijah tells him, was there no God in Israel? You couldn't inquire of our own God? You had to go to these false gods to find out? He says, you're going to die. You're not going to recover. So he dies. His son becomes king. Now we pick up in chapter 2. And it came about that when the Lord was about to take up Elijah by a whirlwind to heaven, take up Elijah by a whirlwind. That's vitally important. To heaven. To heaven is also vitally important. That Elijah went with Elisha from Gilgal. Elijah said to Elisha, stay here, for the Lord has sent me as far as Bethel. But Elisha said, as the Lord lives and you yourself live, I'm not going to leave you here. So they went down together to Bethel. I think the reason that Elisha doesn't want to leave Elijah, and this happens 2 more times, is because he knows the king's men are going to come back for Elijah and take him away. And he's nervous, scared about that. Maybe he thinks he can help in some way. Maybe he thinks they'll do battle again. Watch this, verse 3. Then the sons of the prophets who were at Bethel came out to Elisha and said to him, do you know that the Lord will take away your master from over you today? So they know that Elijah is going to be taken away. They're prophets. And Elisha said, yes, I know, be still. Elijah said to him, Elisha, please stay here, for the Lord has sent me to Jericho now. But he said, no, I'm not going to stay. The sons of the prophets at Jericho came out and said the same thing. Do you know that today Elijah is going to be taken away from you? Verse 6. Then Elijah said to him, please stay here. They went down to the Jordan. Same thing happens. Elisha says, no, I'm going with you. Okay. Now, verse 8. Elijah took his mantle, sorry, got a little blurry there. Elijah took his mantle, his cloak, and he folded it up and struck the waters of the Jordan, and they were divided, and so the 2 of them crossed over on dry ground. Well, that sounds familiar. Verse 9, when they had crossed over, Elijah said to Elisha, ask what I shall do for you before I'm taken from you. And Elisha said, please let a double portion of your spirit be upon me. This sounds like Acts chapter 1. You've got Jesus about to go away. He converses with his disciples. They're also near the Jordan. He's giving them instructions. He knows he's going to be taken away. Let's see, there's more. Are there prophets in Acts chapter 1? Like there are prophets here from the school of prophets? 2 men in white clothes appear, white garments appear to the disciples. Man of Galilee, why are you standing here looking up? So forth and so on. More than likely, they are Moses and Elijah, the same 2 prophets that were with Jesus on the Mount of Transfiguration when they went up to the mountain. Like Moses went up to the mountain. Moses appears there with Jesus. They're up. They're in the mountain. Jesus went up in Acts chapter 1. Elijah's going up to heaven here. But is he going literally? Let's look. Let a double portion of your spirit be upon me. Watch what Elijah says. Verse 10, he said, you have asked a hard thing. Nevertheless, if you see me when I am taken from you, then so shall it be for you. But if you do not see me, then you will not get the portion of my spirit. In Acts chapter 1, Jesus says, he says in other places, John 14, it's important that I go away so that the Comforter can come to you. It's also a passing of the mantle. In Acts chapter 1, Jesus says, go into Jerusalem and wait until the Holy Spirit comes upon you. It's Elijah talking to Elisha in that sense, right? Or drawing the parallels here. Now watch this, verse 11. And as they were going along and talking, as Jesus was doing, Luke tells us, with the disciples in Acts chapter 1, he was instructing them. He stayed with them 40 days. As they were going along and talking, behold, there appeared a chariot of fire and horses of fire, which separated the 2 of them, and Elijah went up by a whirlwind. Now, before we go on, let's say a couple things about the chariots and the horses and the whirlwind. First of all, do a word search throughout the scriptures on whirlwind, and you will find over and over and over again that this is referring to war language. This is referring to a battle. Okay, let's look at a few of those passages. Let's go to Isaiah chapter 40. Just to prove the point here, verse 24. Now let's back up. Let's go to 22. This is talking about God. It is he who sits above the circles of the earth, and its inhabitants to him are like grasshoppers. He is the one who stretches out the heavens like a garment, like a curtain, and spreads them out like a tent to dwell in. He is the one who reduces the rulers to nothing. So he calls the rulers the heavens. He draws the parallel between the 2 of them. It's symbolic, right? Who makes the judges of the earth meaningless, of the land. So he's got the rulers and the judges as the heavens that he rolls up like a scroll, we read in the New Testament and in the Old. This is talking about the destruction of leaders, of nations. Watch this. Hardly have they even been planted. Hardly had they even been sown into the ground. Hardly has their stock even taken root in the earth before God merely blows on them and they wither, and the whirlwind carries them away like stubble. This is the destruction, the defeat of enemy rulers. They're taken away in war, in some type of battle, some type of captivity, whatever you will. And he refers to them not only as heavens, but he refers to them as trees, like we've seen in my video on the trees. Hardly are they planted before God comes and blows them down. Hardly are they sown into the ground. Okay, let's flip over to Isaiah 41. Let's begin in verse 13, for I am the Lord your God, who upholds your right hand, who says to you, do not fear, I will help you. Do not fear, you worm. Jacob, you men of Israel, I will help you, declares the Lord, and your Redeemer is the Holy One of Israel. Behold, I have made you a new, sharp threshing sledge with double edges. You will thresh the mountains and pulverize them. This is war language. He's saying, I'm there for you. You're going to defeat your enemies. Ready? Watch this. You will winnow them. The winnowing fork, John the Baptist, Jesus. That language. You will winnow them, right? This is AD 70. The winnowing fork would come, separating the wheat from the chaff. The chaff would be burned up in the fire. Same language. Watch this. You will winnow them, and the wind will carry them away. There's the chaff. Jesus is referring to this language. He's using the same language. He was also a Hebrew prophet, like Isaiah. Here we go. And then you will rejoice. Oh, I'm sorry, I skipped. You will winnow them, and the wind will carry them away, and the whirlwind will scatter them. Well, what whirlwind scattered the apostate Jews in the first century in the New Testament era? Wasn't it the Roman armies who came? Wasn't that the storm? Wasn't that the whirlwind that came and carried away the Jews into captivity and sold them off into slavery, into Egypt again, into the mines? As Josephus tells us, Mines, they went and he took the younger ones and sold them off into slavery. The Romans did, Titus, and they made them work in the salt mines in Egypt. I think it was the salt mines. This language is everywhere from Deuteronomy forward, even before. This is just a repeat, right? And we can look at more passages. Let's look at. Let's see, where was that? There was a really good one here. Oh, Jeremiah. I think it is, 23:19. Let's start verse 17. No, let's start 16. Thus says the Lord of armies, do not listen to the words of the prophets who are prophesying to you. They are leading you into futility. They speak a vision of their own imagination, not from the mouth of the Lord. They keep saying to those who despise me, the Lord has said, you will have peace. You'll have peace in the land. As for everyone who walks in the stubbornness of his own heart, they say, calamity will not come upon you. Calamity will not come upon you. That means war, captivity, destruction, conquering, so forth. Verse 18, but who has stood in the counsel of the Lord that he should see and hear his word? Who's come and asked me? You're listening to these prophets who are saying everything's going to be fine. He's saying, who's asked me? Watch this. Who's given heed to his word and listened? Behold, the whirlwind of the Lord has gone forth in his wrath, even a whirling tempest, and it will swirl down on the head of the wicked. The anger of the Lord will not turn back until he has performed and carried out the purposes of his heart. On and on. Whirlwind, trouble, armies coming. Well, who comes to get Elijah here in 2 Kings chapter 2? The king sends out his chariots. You say, no, but this is a supernatural chariot, whisking him away literally into the heavens. They stood and watched him go away. I don't think so. Let's continue reading on. 2 Kings chapter 2, verse 11. As they were going along and talking, behold, there appeared a chariot of fire and horses of fire, which separated the two of them, Elijah and Elisha. And in Acts chapter 1, we see Jesus being separated from his disciples. On the Mount of Transfiguration, they were not separated. It says they were caught up together in the cloud. In Acts chapter 1, Jesus is enveloped in the cloud. He goes up. They don't go up. How did they go up in the Mount of Transfiguration? Where did they go up to? Where did Moses go up to receive the old law, the old covenant? Jesus was instituting the new covenant, and he went up. Moses and Elijah appeared there with him because they also went up, right? Moses went up to Sinai. Elijah's going up here, at least in some way. And I haven't figured it all out. I'm just trying to pique your interest and get you to study these things on your own and do a better job than I'm doing. Figure it out even in more detail. Now let's go. There appeared a chariot of fire and horses of fire. Well, let's look at that. Chariots of fire and horses of fire. Let's flip ahead a few chapters here in 2 Kings. See what we can see. Where is this now? Okay, chapter 23. Watch this. The context here is after this king who's sending out his soldiers to get Elijah, he died. His son becomes king. I believe he was sending out soldiers to come get Elijah because he prophesied against his father and his father died. So now he's sending out soldiers to come get Elijah. And after that king died, another king was born, and eventually that king was a righteous king. And he was ordering that all of the idols would be taken out of the Israelite temple because they had become apostate and they were worshiping false gods, even in the temple of God. So the context of this chapter is they're emptying out the temple of these false gods, Asherah poles, and so forth. Now watch this. That's the context. Let's start in verse 9. Well, let's see. I don't want to back up too far. Let's start in verse 9. Nevertheless, the priests of the high places did not go up to the altar of the Lord in Jerusalem, but they ate unleavened bread among their brothers. He also defiled Topheth with idols, which is in the valley of the son of Hinnom, that no man might make his son or his daughter pass through the fire of Molech. So this king destroyed that place where they used to sacrifice the Israelites to the god of Molech. So not only did he empty out the idols from the temple, but he destroyed their worship site in the valley of Hinnom, which is Gehenna, the Gehenna that Jesus talked about, which is also quite interesting. And then watch this. So the king is doing away with all of their altars and sacrificial centers to false gods. Now look at verse 11 of 23, 2 Kings. He did away with the horses. He kills the horses here, which the kings of Judah had dedicated to the sun god. The sun. Fire. Watch this. And at the entrance of the house of the Lord by the chamber. Okay, so they're at the entrance of the temple. This king kills the horses that the people of Judah had dedicated to the god of the sun, S-U-N. So again, we're still in the context of idolatry. Watch this. And then he burned the chariots of the sun, the chariots of fire. Now, way before these are burned, this king sends them out to get Elijah. You say, oh, you're forcing it. Am I? Let's finish the verse. 2 Kings 2:11. And as they were going along, talking, behold, there appeared a chariot of fire. I think that's the chariot of the sun that was mentioned there. Watch this. The king's coming after him. And horses of fire. Those were the horses that were killed, that were dedicated to the sun. Doesn't that make more sense than supernatural chariots made out of fire and horses made out of literal fire coming down out of heaven to pick Elijah up and whisk him away into the sky? I think it does. I think that was this and this was that. This is horses of the sun, chariots of the sun, dedicated to pagan idols. Right, now watch this. Here comes the real nail in the coffin. Are you sitting down? Here we go. Verse 12. Elisha saw it. Remember, he said, if you see it, you'll get, if you see me go, you'll get the Holy Spirit like you asked. If you don't see me, you won't get it. Watch this. Elisha saw it and cried out, my father, Elijah, Elijah. Ready? Watch this. My father, look, the chariots of Israel and their horsemen. They're coming. He cried out, the chariots of Israel and their horsemen. Not some chariot come down out of heaven to whisk him away into the skies. If we need more proof, let's continue on. Let's skip around here. Well, let's read on. Then he took hold of his own clothes and tore them in two pieces. Why? Because Elijah was taken captive by the king's men. The other times they came for him, they defeated them. This time he was taken away. And he knew he had to be taken away. Just like Jesus, when his disciples said, never, Lord, never will you die. Get behind me, Satan, he said. Then he said, there came a time where Jesus said, this time my hour has come. and I have to go away. If I don't go away, then the Father can't send the Comforter to you. You see the parallels? Okay, watch this. Then Elisha took up the mantle, the cloak of Elijah, that fell from him to the ground. And then he returned and stood on the banks of the Jordan. He took the mantle of Elijah that fell from him, struck the waters, and said, "Where is the Lord, the God of Elijah? Why have you let him take him away?" Watch this. This is not something he was praising God for. He's not saying, "Oh yeah, God came, hey prophets, did you see that? God came out of heaven and took him away. This is fantastic." No, he's angry. He says, "Where is God? Where are you? The king just came and took away the main prophet of Israel." Watch this. And when he had also struck the waters of the Jordan, they were divided there, and Elijah crossed over. Now when the sons of the prophets who were at Jericho opposite him and saw him, they said, "The spirit of Elijah now rests on Elisha." Why? Because Elijah was gone, taken away. You're taking over now, Elisha. Watch this. And they came to meet him and bowed themselves to the ground before him. So the prophets in the school of the prophets now understood that Elisha had taken Elijah's place because he had been taken prisoner. Verse 16, they said to him, now here comes, are you sitting down? They said to him, "Behold now." They said, the prophet said to Elisha, "Behold, look, there are with you right now 50 strong men." That's why I think these are the ones that defeated the king's men the first 2 times he sent them out. He says, "Look, there are 50 warriors standing here with you." These guys were obviously trained to fight. "Please let them go. Please let them go. Let us go and search for your master. Perhaps the Spirit of the Lord has taken him away from the king," that is. That's how I read it. Watch this. "Taken him and put him in a mountain somewhere or hid him in some valley." Elisha, when Elijah's taken away, says, "Where's God? Why didn't you deliver him?" The prophets say, "Maybe they did. Let us go look." Now let me ask you this. Why would they ever say, "Let's go look for Elijah," if they watched him or he was taken away supernaturally in horses made out of fire and chariots made out of fire up into heaven, whisked away into the invisible celestial realm? Why would they ever say, "Let's go try to find him"? That just makes no sense at all. Verse 17, "But when they urged him, he finally said yes. They went out and they looked for him for 3 days. Wasn't that something? 3 days. That pops up everywhere in the scripture, doesn't it? I'm going to leave it at that. Go search out for yourself the parallels between 2 Kings chapter 2 and Acts chapter 1, and then try to connect 1 Thessalonians 4, 13 through 17 with these catching up. These catching ups. We must take into account all of these things, not just isolate a passage and say, "Oh, they were looking up, he went up into the sky, that's that. He floated away into heaven." Well, how many of you, before you watch this video, and maybe you still do think Elijah was taken away supernaturally, but how many of you believed he was and now are convinced that he wasn't? Is it then possible that what many think may have happened in Acts chapter 1 with Jesus, or in 1 Thessalonians 4 with the believers? Isn't it possible that that may not be taken literally? Like Elisha wasn't literally taken to heaven? Might those other 2 passages be viewed in a similar way somehow? Let's not just throw the baby out with the bathwater here and be dogmatic and say, no. Okay, the Elijah one, okay, I'm seeing that now. But the Jesus one, nope. Or the disciples, nope. The Christians were whisked away into the sky. That's it. Well, in the transfiguration, when Jesus was transformed into that new body, that supernatural body, whatever that was, whatever that meant, that happened up on a mountain. When Moses went up to receive the law and the presence of God was up there. Where did he go? To the literal heaven? To the invisible realm? No, he went up on a mountain. The law was given on the mountain. So they're always going up to the mountain throughout the Bible. Always up, up, up. to the mountain. We could look at a bunch more passages where they go up. But that signifies, when they went up to Jerusalem for the feast 3 times a year, they always said, we're going up to Jerusalem, right? That signified heaven. That signified God's presence. Where was God located? In one geographical locale for the Israelites, in the Holy of Holies, inside of a temple that sat on a temple mount, that sat on a city, that sat in the Holy Land. So they went up from the Holy Land. The Holy of Holies was designated as the heavens, the place of God's presence. And that, read through the Old Testament when it's discussing how the tabernacle was to be built and what the curtains represented, what the materials represented. They represented heaven. So Jesus was caught up into the heavens in a cloud. Well, there's cloud language all throughout the scriptures. That's not referring to literal clouds. So we've got to not be so staunch and white-knuckled in our positions. I'm open, man. I'm open to learn. What exactly happened in Acts chapter 1? I don't know. But it seems like the transfiguration, and I didn't even see that. I made a prior video to this and I changed it. I'm making a new one because a gentleman on Facebook made the connection for me of the Mount of Transfiguration, and it made much more sense than some of the ways I was looking at it. So I'll post his name down below and give him credit for that. So we're always learning, we're always growing, we're always saying, whoa, that makes a lot of sense. So can we remain open to these things? Let me close by asking this question. What difference does it make for you and me today, right now, in our relationship with God, whether or not Jesus floated up into the heavens literally, or it was something else? Or they were raptured away in AD 70 off of planet Earth and floated into the sky, or it was something else? Well, if you're a proponent of the Israel-only movement, then 1 Thessalonians chapter 4 does make a difference. Because if you believe that they were whisked away and that all ended and there was no relationship with God available afterwards, that makes a big difference. If you believe they weren't literally whisked away, but that we who are alive and remain would be caught up together with them in the air, means something else in the heavenly places. Look, they were already seated in the heavenly places. Paul told them that. They were literally living on the planet. He says, we have been seated with Christ in heavenly places. Let me ask you, was that literal? Had they literally been sitting on thrones in the invisible celestial realm? No. So why must 1 Thessalonians 4, which uses the same type of language, when people look at a certain view of 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, they say, you're playing with the language. You're messing about. What does it say? It says that they were caught up to meet him in the air, and that's what it means. Okay, well, what does Paul say? It says, we are seated in heavenly places. Don't mess with the language. Don't screw around with it. That means that the disciples in the first century, all the followers of Christ, the Gentiles that Paul was writing to in Ephesians, were literally, while he was writing to them, he wrote to them in heaven, because he says, we've been seated, you too, in heavenly places with Christ. They were sitting right next to him there. Hey, Jesus, they could literally reach over and shake his hand. They were in the heavenly places with him. You say, no, well, that's figurative. Okay. So what's it going to be? Don't just come on these videos and hammer me and say, this is garbage, this is crap, you suck. Right? You're trying to figuratize this stuff. You're trying to make everything a symbol. I'm looking at things that are already symbolic. Heavenly places, the heavens, the clouds, so forth and so on. The whirlwind. Catching up, going up, and I'm trying to see how they fit everywhere, doing my best. Well, thanks for listening today, guys. I could just go on, as I'm sure you could as well. That'll do it. See you guys next time. Thank you so much.